Disclaimer: I am a counseling student. I am not a mental health professional, and I cannot give or offer mental health services. You are listening to Good You. I'm your host Samantha, and today I sit down with James Williams and discuss somatic healing. So I never have heard about this before I talked to James, but this has a lot to do with reconnecting your body and your mind, especially after some type of trauma or something, even just our everyday life, to where eventually our mind and our body start to separate, and then anxiety happens, depression happens, and somatic healing allows you to reconnect those two things together. So it's really interesting. I hope you guys are excited. Make sure to follow James on Instagram at _James D. Williams. And yeah, let's get started. So, hello, James. Thank you so much for being here with me today. How are you?
I'm excited, I'm nervous and anxious all at the same time.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you for
That's the
having
perfect
me.
way to get started. But don't worry, because this is going to be just like, we're going to forget that we're recording in like 2 minutes from now.
I'm excited.
Well, tell us a little about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm James Williams. I'm an international speaker and healer. I'm the founder and CEO of the Somatic Human Design Institute and Somatic Relational Counseling. In New York and New Jersey, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. In New Jersey, I am a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor and certified school social worker. And I also am a certified clinical trauma professional. So within the last 3 weeks, I'm excited to also add that I am now the host of the Somatic Human Design podcast, and I just received the title of Adjunct Professor James. So I'm recently brought on by Montclair University. So I'm wearing a lot of hats
I
as of
was
today.
about to say, but congratulations. What's the
Thank you.
podcast name so people can go
It's
follow?
the Somatic Human, or it is titled Somatic Human Design Podcast.
Okay, just make sure we get that out. Go follow that, go listen to it. That's so
Yes,
awesome. Are you
thank
excited?
you. I am so excited. And again, I'm always feeling a bunch of emotions. And I always say it's important to honor all the emotions as they show up. I'm excited and I'm anxious for everything that's in store for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Anxiety can be also a product of overexcitement.
Exactly. It is not a flag of like, oh my God, something bad's happening. I'm like, it could be,
Yes.
I'm actually so hyped, right? And I
Yeah.
keep telling my friends, I'm hyped.
Yeah. And like, it's not always a bad thing. It can be just that you're like so excited that your body's like, okay, are we excited or are we scared? Like,
Like, what's happening? What's happening? Like,
yeah.
so
So I like that you said to
all
make
of it.
sure to like experience the emotions so that you can tell your body what you are experiencing.
Exactly, all of it.
Yeah. So what made you enter this line of work in the first place?
So, if you are familiar with the Kaiser's adverse childhood study experiences, then you will know that it is one of the most comprehensive studies that measures childhood abuse and neglect and pairs it with household challenges. And we recognize that the higher the score, the higher the child is to have poor health outcomes. So, by 18, I had a score of 6. And so I was already primed for hardship. I, I was experiencing over years, my immune system continued to weaken. By 2020, my health really declined and I was hospitalized for a liver condition. In addition to, in that same year, I developed COVID. And so I was facing organ failure. And they were telling me, this is, we can't get you on a list. And this is early death, right? And this is before I even turned 30. I was 29. I actually spent my 29th birthday in the hospital. And I have suffered from trauma. I have a neurological disorder. I had chronic suicidal ideations that went on for 10 years. And I began to recognize that millennials are experiencing a decline in their health and their mental and emotional health, and also physical health, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing buzzwords like burnout, self-care. Yet when people are actually trying to take care of themselves, we call them selfish. And so as a somatic human design coach, I'm really passionate about helping millennials rediscover who they are and help them to do what lights them up.
Yeah.
Right? Live life in a way that is enjoyable, fulfilling. Have a
And not
career that you
selfish.
love, that is not selfish.
Yeah.
If you want to have a business that is your own and you want to do these projects that are your own, you can do them. I'm doing them. Everything I ever thought I would do 12 years ago, it's all happening today.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think part of this is like a battle of the generations?
Oh, what a question. Yes, I do. I do think it is a battle of the generations, but I also think it is not intentional,
No.
right?
Yeah.
I think when we look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we see that society is expected to go up certain levels. And there's many people who come, even, first generation immigrants who arrive here, they only know but so much. They only have achieved but so much. Many of us are still at the safety and stability stage, and we're still all climbing up, trying to be who we want to be. And so I just think based on your family, based on your history, you might know a certain level to reach because that's what your family got. And everyone thinks, okay, that's it. Once you get to this stage in the hierarchy of needs, that's it.
Yeah.
Except I think many millennials, people said it before us, but millennials are like, there's more than just like safety and stability, right? And so I think this is what we're noticing is that we're all just trying to climb up this hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And some of us, because of our family, they gave us the stepping stone to get to the next stage. And I'm going to help millennials realize we still can go higher, higher.
Yeah. It's funny. My therapist the other day asked me, like, who raised you? And I said, well, are we talking financially, physically, mentally, emotionally?
Yes.
And she said, well, all of them, but you make them sound like they're different people. And I was like, I think they are, because financially and physically, that's when we're supported as millennials, right? Like that's but also that feels owed sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
It's that like, I've given you a roof, and it's like, aren't you legally like made to do that?
I think when you became a parent, some people did not, but like you decided to take on this responsibility, right? I will do my best to honor all that you've given me, and let's not hold me back because of an obligation or a sense of obligation. And so I write about this extensively in one of my books that is coming out soon. I really talk a lot about this exactly what we just talked about, this fight between being a millennial and like this thing of called obligation.
Yeah.
Right. And so
well, I can't wait to read that. Please let me know when it comes out.
I will. Thank you very much.
And I'll post it on the Instagram as well, because I think everyone could use that. I think a lot of people, especially the people that are following this podcast, are mostly 25 plus. So that's perfect, and I think also it comes from a place of adults not knowing any better, one, and not having that experience too. So like, how could they possibly know how to undo that? And it takes a lot of learning. Like I remember growing up, and there was always that saying, like, there's no book on parenting. And then I'm now old enough where I'm like, there are plenty.
Can we speak on that though? Like there actually is, right? There's trained professionals who study human, right? Like, but I always say, and I title this thing in my book, I say healthy level of accountability.
Yes.
Right. Yes. And it is like throughout the entire book, it's like healthy level of accountability, because there are some parts of this world that there's some things that we experience that are out of our control.
Yep.
And when you have the awareness, you no longer can use that as an excuse to continue to bulldoze through someone's life or to bulldoze through life.
Exactly.
Right. So once you develop the insight, there's all about accountability now. It's up to you.
Exactly. Yep. And I think that's sometimes the hardest thing for people to feel, because it can come along with like the feelings of guilt and shame,
Absolutely.
which suck to feel.
Absolutely.
It never
And are
feels good.
necessary. No, they're
Exactly.
necessary
But it
emotions.
is. Exactly. And that's what gets
Yes.
you to the healing process. Like that's what gets you to that next step of who you want to be
Absolutely.
and what you want life
Absolutely.
to look like.
1000%.
So speaking of healing, today we're talking about somatic healing and or somatic experiencing. So I'd love for you to touch on both. And can you explain what those are?
Yes. So somatic experiencing was developed by Dr. Peter Levine. It is a body-oriented therapeutic approach towards healing from unresolved trauma and various forms of toxic stress. He studied animals and noticed how many of them manage stress and how their stress in their body after a threat response is activated. So I always think back to like, why is it when an animal is like almost facing near death, if it survives, it can get up and just like prance away, right? No care in the world.
So
Yet
true.
we get stuck. We get stuck. So for me, that's where the somatic healing comes in, because the way that I operate, I say it, our thinking brain is what keeps us stuck. We want to know why this happened to me. What does this mean? Why did I respond to the stress that way? And when we do all of that, the trauma does not leave the body. It stays in there.
Mm-hmm.
It stays stored. And so we can get 30 years later finding out exactly now, oh, it's 30 years later and I'm just now finding out that this person hurt me because they were hurt as a kid. Well, that's 30 years that trauma was stored in the body because we were looking for the why. So for me, I consider somatic healing a journey of learning to reconnect with your body, learning to understand what it likes, what it dislikes, what it needs. I say somatic healing is relearning consent in a profound way. What we might have as a mental understanding of life is one thing, but we are so very much disconnected from our unique design.
Yeah.
And so that's where I created the Somatic Human Design Institute, because I want us to learn how to communicate and tap into our body in a unique way, because we might say, I want to live life like this, and I want to live in this particular neighborhood or this particular city, and your body is very much programmed differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why am I unhappy even though I'm living in this house that I wanted for years, in this city that I thought I loved? And your body's like, I'm going to give you a bunch of allergies, right? Now you're going to be allergic to your environment. Now I'm going to make everything feel like itchy, right? And now when you go outside, you're going to be overwhelmed sensory wise because you are not in the space that I need to be in.
Yeah.
So I think somatic healing is really learning how to reconnect with yourself.
When do you think that connection gets lost? In the trauma, in the crisis, or do you think just over time?
I think I think it is over time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's over time because the older we get, the more we become conditioned by the world
Mm-hmm.
that you need to move in a certain way, right? You need to love who I want you to love. This is coming from our parents and caregivers. You need to live this way. You need to have a house. You need to have 3 kids and a job and a dog. And like, this is the life you need to live. And all those messages we get, we stop being those childhood versions of us. Yeah. I remember myself being outside, playing in the dirt, making up games, right? Like with superpowers and like rolling around and like getting up. And now if I try to run outside, I'm exhausted. Yeah. I'm like, run where? You want me to do a mile? Like,
literally. But we're supposed to fit in this little box. We got to fit in this box. Can't stray away, or you're the weird one out, right?
You're the weird one. I'm always the weird one. And I'm like, listen, well, I'm gonna be the weird version of me again. Yeah. Because that person was lit up by life, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, if you experience trauma and crises and adversities, those add to conditioning. So I think we all are conditioned because we all go through the sort of same grade school system that says by high school, figure it all out. Yeah. But some of us experience trauma before we're even 18, and that really pushes us into being an adult before we're even ready. I think it's not a one or, I think it's an and.
Yeah. It's sad when you talk about trauma and just what people experience at that age, because we were talking about before we hopped on how teenage years, my heart goes out to every teenager out there
Yes,
living their life and trying their best and
absolute best.
trying to figure out what is independent for them and what it is a power struggle at that age. It's a self trying to find your identity at that age, and
Absolutely.
then to experience some type of crisis or trauma at that age to add on during that crazy hormone time is
Absolutely.
awful.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I think we are literally designed and we're literally biologically hardwired to figure out who we are on a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, many of us in teens, even in 2022, right, we were not equipped to program who we are in the way that in the system that we are in right now. And so
Exactly.
the teens will always experience something that previous teen generations will never understand. Just like we experienced something, the birth of technology, what that all meant, right? Our parents don't know what that is, right? And so we all have something to teach each other.
Mm-hmm.
And many of us are not willing to listen. But if
It
you do not, your body will literally scream at you
until
and
you
tell
do.
you.
Yep,
Exactly.
absolutely. And what's funny that you said technology with our parents, like they went to school and got bullied, right? And
Yes.
they got to go home. And now
Yes.
because of technology, you're bullied both at school and at home and
Continuously.
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 Technology is a blessing and a curse.
It
The
is.
biggest one that you could
it
name.
brings you and I together, right? And it creates this connection.
Yes.
And if used in an unenergetic way, it will be someone's downfall. So
Yes, absolutely. And it has been plenty
yes.
of times over. So what we're kind of about to touch on it, I can tell, but what uh are clients commonly seeking somatic healing for?
You
Obviously
will
the trauma.
Yes. You will find that most clients that are coming, I've noticed that most clients who are coming in to see me for somatic experiencing have tried the cognitive behavioral approaches. They are DBT'd out, they are CBT'd out, they have all the insight into the world. They have even in my own experience in my therapist, I always say, don't say, congratulations, you have this insight, because that's going to make me walk away. Because you can have all the insight, but if we're not doing anything, then what is that for?
Yeah.
So I find that most clients that are coming in with SE are looking to figure out another way to move through life because they can literally feel their bodies falling apart. They are experiencing so many different trauma-related symptoms, nightmares, flinching, right? They might be restless when they're in a chair, and you might see that they are very much seeking intimacy, but so uncomfortable by it.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that up too, because trauma and anxiety and depression go much farther than the mental symptoms. You have these physical symptoms that come along with it. And
Absolutely.
people think like, well, can't see it like a broken arm, but
No.
you can if you really do look enough. Like what these people are going through, they're having physical symptoms.
And you can see it. I am studying. I think that's what SC helped me to do. What it continues to help me to do. I am literally trained to track someone's body.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm sitting on a bus, I'm on a bus and I see someone and they're like flicking their nose or just I'm like, what are they uncomfortable by?
Oh my gosh, you are a walking body
Right.
language specialist.
It is a little scary sometimes. I'm like, don't look. I'm like, just keep your eyes straight. And I'd be like, don't look, because you just might see something no one's asking you to see. So I'm like, okay, this is right. This is where consent comes in.
Oh, yeah.
Right. This is again where consent comes in this profound way of no one's asking me for my input right now, unless
Yeah.
you are literally signing a contract saying work with me. So you literally learn to track clients' bodies and help them to understand it for themselves.
Yeah. And do you think sometimes that feels for the clients kind of like gives them the icky feeling because they're like,
Yes.
stop looking at me, stop observing me?
Yes. If being a therapist was already a thing that people are like, are you trying to figure out what's in my brain? I'm like, I literally am not, first of all, paid to do that right now. Second of all, I don't want to do that right now. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
If that was already one thing that made it a very difficult, it sort of made it very difficult to communicate with people, they know, it became even more difficult when this part of my training came in. And I will often have to talk to clients about making sure you are actually ready to do this, because you might be saying, I'm 100% certain, and I'm shaking my head, yes, but your head is like, I'm 100% certain. And I'm like, let's take a pause and let's check in. And they're like, I'm certain. And then they start to, and they're like, actually, and then there's, right. And then we get into the education.
And for those who aren't seeing, he was shaking his head no.
Yes. So it's like, are you sure you want to do this? And it might be yes, but their head is really saying no. Yeah. I'm like, let's continue to do some education.
Yeah. Have you ever read, I have it literally on my bookshelf, What Every Body is Saying by Joe Navarro?
No, please send me that.
Oh, he's a body language specialist, and I found the book so awesome and fascinating. So I will send that to you.
Definitely.
Yeah. Ooh. Well, so that's very interesting because something else we were talking about before we started recording was like how we're so like going through this program, and I mean, for you becoming a therapist and counselor, or social worker, and for me just being in school for now, but like so far being able to see society and just people outside is like completely different now than what it used to be.
It's like unlocking a part of your brain. Yeah. And I spent years post-graduation sort of hiding from the world, because I'm like, if I look too hard or if I look long enough, I will see people in pain. And that is what I'm currently living in the city area. And I gotta sometimes get out. I leave my house so much more, and I mean leaving my town, because there's so much pain. And I'm like, I can't sustain it like this. Yeah. It is unlocking a part of our brains that I think many of us do need, as to echo what you said before about everyone taking a counseling class, right? Communications class. I'm over here like, get some skills classes, because it does unlock something. And it is a journey and a half to learn how to sort of navigate life. I'm still learning. And It's been 7 years since I've graduated from grad school. So it's not easy, and helps you be a better version of you. Yep.
And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
No.
You start seeing the flaws in your own behaviors and the people really close to you, which can really suck. But it's
that part.
Yeah.
I think people need, what people can understand about any therapist, or if I'll speak for myself, going in through the graduate program helped me learn more about me and what I needed to fix in my life. Less about my friend over there or my friend. It was more about learning, oh my God, I don't have boundaries. Or, oh my God, I let this person walk all right. And then it's a corrective experience for self. Mm-hmm. And you have the added benefit of that you're expected to then also go help. So
like, oh my God, I have this fear of authority figures that I didn't realize.
I'm being read. I'm reading myself in a book.
I could probably write my own book now, just all about me and what I've noticed about myself in the past year.
The best books.
It's just the tea. Y'all will just get a whole copy. I actually don't even think I've had any discussion about like school or like really myself or what goes on this podcast. And I think that that's something that I need to do. So I'm gonna do that on a future episode.
Unlock that, please.
Yeah. You might as well know my life at this point. It's pretty interesting sometimes. People really are like, why don't you have a sitcom? And I'm like, I'm just waiting to get signed. Whenever someone wants it, I got
Speak
it.
into the universe and it will come. You are literally meant to have a sitcom and it's now going to happen.
Yes.
Mark my words.
Right, well, you're going to be a guest star on there. Okay, let's go.
Oh, thanks.
Okay. So, can you talk about some of like outcomes that you've seen with your clients? Like from start to end, how you've seen them heal?
Yes. So I had a client that I worked with who was an international student from China, and there was a lot of fear around being supported and believed because of the trauma that this client experienced. And we had to do a lot of education around consent. We had to do both through somatic lens and a actual education on consent.
Mm-hmm.
And what I, through that experience with that client, and when we learned about tracking the body, we're learning about understanding what is unique about us. And the client would say, I feel like I experience people's emotions and I often just say something to them. And I don't know that they are, I think that they're upset about what I'm saying. And being that this was also a cultural barrier, we talked a lot about like, what is it to be empathetic? Mm-hmm. And how does empathy show up in her body? Right. And so we worked together for about half of a year, but through learning about somatic experience, through learning about somatic experiencing and somatic healing, and learning to unresolve those stuck points, if you will, where when the client would speak, for example, most people would cut her off before she even finished a sentence. As a therapist, myself included, I found myself doing that within the first 2 or 3 sessions. And I paused and I said, I noticed that when I cut you off, your body lifts. And then throughout the entire session, you're like this, you're tensed up. Mm. And I want to first apologize because I noticed that I cut you off because I'm trying to say, I understand what you're saying, but I'm just doing that like unintentionally, just like word vomiting. So I was the first person to ever say sorry to her in her entire life. Second, it was people are telling me I don't understand what they're saying, but they don't give me a chance to finish my sentence at all. So when I'm trying to listen to someone and support them, they're saying, you don't understand, but it's like, I was trying to make sure I understood what you were saying, but you keep cutting me off. And we did the most powerful sessions of me just saying, I'm sorry that what your trauma that happened to you. And I'm sorry that I'm cutting you off. And you're the first person in my life to ever say, I'm sorry. Yeah. And her body throughout the rest of our work remained in a state of openness rather than a state of like
defense.
And I tell people, for those who are listening, like, even for me, I learned like when I'm on the edge of my seat and it's like my body is pulled towards the door, I'm like, oh, I'm ready to run. And so I would be like, hey, client, I'm noticing that you're right. Like, what's happening?
And are you trying to leave?
It was like, where's the door? And it's like, what? What do you mean? No, I'm okay. And then it was like, are you sure? Like, because I noticed what I'm doing, right? I'm saying this, or I cut you off. And so I had to pull together within a couple of sessions. I had to pull together first and not acknowledging me cutting her off, mostly because I was trying to make sure I understood what she was saying because of the language barrier, the community, the barrier. But also sorry, because that's what you're supposed to do as a human. You cut someone off, say I'm sorry, so that they can finish their sentence. But through that, and then mixing that with education of the body, she felt more grounded. But then she moved a step further and began to make small talk on buses with people. She started to go to events and make small talk with people. Whereas it had taken us a whole half a year, it was like, I'm never going to an event. I'm never going to talk to a single person. She began to feel so comfortable and confident in her body, in herself, that before we discharged and before I terminated from my job, she was making small talk and communicating with people confidently and not allowing herself to be cut off by people.
Yes, ma'am.
So I so sad to end that therapeutic relationship, and it was just a poetic way for me to leave my job and for us to terminate from our relationship.
It's like bittersweet.
And I got there through tracking the body.
Yeah.
And using the basic principles of therapy, because SC is a supplementary approach. It's added to what you do as a therapist. So I literally, and I have so many other stories where I've like used SC and it took clients beyond where I ever imagined going as a therapist.
And there's not enough research on SE. I was looking this up, and you get the very well mind and like the every type of website we normally use, and
exactly.
But like the studies behind it are really promising. Like I copied and pasted this so I could read it, but it says, while not much research has been published on somatic experiencing, one study, a randomized control trial, showed that 44% of the participants lost the diagnosis of PTSD. That's huge.
That is profound. And we are still in an empirical-based mode. We're not evidence-based yet. And that's part of the problem, I think, with the field is it has to be evidence-based.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the evidence-based information out there, what populations were being studied and treated with this?
Yeah. Well,
right?
Also, let's talk about the field for a second. And I have a bone to pick here.
Let's go.
The reason why is because money. And unfortunately, like with a lot of other different areas and systems, the mental health system can be just as corrupt sometimes when it comes to money. And so you got CBT as the fixer leading. For everything else, for literally everything.
Yes.
How do you think that happened? Because it was backed up by money and research, and all that money got more research, and now it's like top researched, and now it's the top response, and like the treatment for everything.
And you cannot be a catch-all. Just like I tell people, if you go to if you're going therapy shopping and you see someone that specializes in everything, they specialize in nothing. Find your niche.
Mm-hmm.
Do what lights you up. Because everything isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
And there's some basic principles of CBT that I 100% adore. And I think CBT is an amazing modality. They all are. And they were studied for specific groups of people in certain socioeconomic classes, right? Yeah. They do not meet the criteria to help everybody. And SC is still in this empirical based phase, yet the research is astounding.
Incredible. There was even more that I didn't copy and paste, but
there's so much more.
Check out just lowering the symptoms of trauma, of the trauma responses. People,
yes,
I think it was like a trial where 75% said that after a few, was it like 7 months, 8 months, that they were experiencing less symptoms. Yeah.
And I've worked with over 10 clients since I got into the program, and the reduction is astounding. Right. I actually have to do my research soon. I have to go pull my research data together, because I also want to be able to say, like, of all these clients that I've worked with, look at the work, look at the progress. But again, I don't know why. And I know that it has been a pivotal part of what I do. And I will continue to use somatic experiencing techniques in everything that I do, both through my therapy practice and my coaching practice. So I can't wait to see what comes next.
And it's such a good feeling to have when you have such passion towards something, because you wake up and you're never tired of it. And there's always somewhere to learn. Like you don't get stuck in this every day doing the same thing. Like every day is different. Every session is different, even with the same client.
Yes.
So
in that protocol, right? There's the difference though, with a lot of evidence-based, there's protocol. There's, if this happens, do this. SC is like, you literally, they said, Peter says, you have to, if you aren't making at least, I'm quoting for myself, if you don't make at least 3 errors in the therapy session, then you're not doing SE. Because there's no protocol of like, it has to be this way at least, right? And I'm like, good, because I might tell the client, let's go here, but I didn't ask for consent. I didn't get the invitation from the client. And I actually had a client within 1 session discharged because I went too quick. And I could see the body like literally shaking. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? And I tried to just do like some settling. I'm like, let's just stop doing this. But I already missed the opportunity window for consent. And so there is literally always going to be mistakes in what we do as professionals, even inside and outside of SE.
There's always one thing, I remember learning in a few of my classes is there's always the chance that you're going to take it too soon, like as a therapist, and like say something that you think the client's ready for, or do something that you think the client's ready to work on, and they're not, and then like they get scared off. And I read this book called Good Morning Monster, and it's so good. Highly recommend it. It's a therapist who talks about 5 of her clients that she considers, or her previous clients that she considers heroes. And where was I going with this? Oh, yes. So almost lost it. But one of the clients, she said something too soon, basically, and that client never came back. And she had to realize and like live with that. And she, even though she was really upset by it, it's something that will happen. And I just read Jeanette McCurdy's book, I'm Glad My Mom Died. And she had the same experience where a therapist mentioned something about her mom not being that perfect motherly figure that she had in her mind imagined. And she never went back to that therapist. And that therapist probably thought the same thing.
But look at, like, we might say this thing that is we might say this thing that is actually needed. And needs to be heard. Yet we've just planted the seed.
Exactly.
And the client doesn't come back. Right. But Jeanette McCartney still remembers that therapist's statement.
And she did end up like really thinking on that. Like once it's said, those words can't get taken back. And
you can't be like, no, it doesn't work.
Yes, unfortunately, because some things.
I'm like,
but like there's. Yes, too soon. Unlike the delete button on your Instagram messages, you don't have that in real life. So, but it planted that seed in her head and realized, like, I'm not the only one who sees this. And like, even though she felt guilty about it, like it gave her almost that okay to do that, to look into it. So
absolutely,
yeah.
But yes, we can talk about SC all day. We can talk about clinical mistakes all day because they are there.
Yeah. Yes. And that's what makes us human.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's like, I think a lot of people see TV shows and movies, and then they see these like psychologists and therapists, and they're like, so how does that make you feel? And really, you're like going to be cutting up with your therapist in the office, and you're going to be having the time of your life sometimes. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you're going to cry, sometimes you're going to get mad, sometimes you're going to be laughing your ass off.
We're going to be laughing all the way through sometimes. We're not like, don't think therapy is just about, oh my God, I need to cry. Like there's no right or wrong way to do therapy. There is good, and I heard many of your episodes about a good match, and yes, that you need to suss that out. Like, but there's no right or wrong way to do therapy.
Exactly. As long as it's right for you.
For you.
Yeah.
I love this.
Me too. So like continuing on with somatic experiencing, does it address the trauma itself, or does it address and focus solely on the effects of the trauma? So I know that you talk a lot about it, you want to get back into your body, but does it also regress and you get to talk through that trauma as well?
So you can, with many of the body-oriented approaches to trauma, that you don't have to talk specifically about the story itself. And so I'll preface it with that. What we notice in SC is we are helping the client get closer and closer to dealing with the most challenging parts of the trauma itself. Mm-hmm. So we might be helping the client deal with the 3 hours that happened after. We might start there and we might go 3 hours before the event. And we might use these two experiences as ways to like check in with the body. Remember this 3 hours before where you felt okay, this 3 hours after you felt horrible. Let's sit with both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And we do it almost like a seesaw. And we call it sort of the vortex counter vortex. So we go into the closer to the vortex experience, we get out of it. And we get closer and closer and closer until we might get to the point of the origin story. Or some people don't even want to go there.
Okay.
And we might get 15 minutes before and after, and that's as much as we do. So it can be of both the trauma itself, but most importantly, it's a lot about what happens after, how our body shows up after, how we judge ourselves for, oh my God, I went into a flight response, or I went into a fight response. I wish I would have done the opposite. And it's like, actually, your body did exactly what it was primed to do. Your body, before you even realize your body made a quick assessment of what's the safest way to get me through this traumatic experience, and it went to that default. That is not your fault. It is not your choice. It was your body's instinctual response to do that. And so we're really doing a lot of education on that as well, that you did what you could do in that moment. And the SC also says, well, let's imagine what it would have been like if you would have done the response that you wish. Mm-hmm. And you might be doing a lot of rehearsals, a lot of somatic rehearsals of like, all right, let's go back to that day and let's rehearse that again. And you really notice in sessions, people's bodies just really like settling. I've literally seen it in real time where we're like, the person would be someone that's like inching towards that door for like 3 months. And now we're like just completely relaxed. Like, James, what is up? I'm ready to go. Like, and just so relaxed, yeah. Right? And most of those times we haven't even touched the story itself. We talked about how people treated you after, how you perceive the event after. Yeah. And how your body continues to show up in relationships now that this years after those trauma experiences. Yeah. And a part of the SE program is you do sessions. You have to do your own SE sessions. Contrary to popular belief, therapy, and a lot of therapists out there might be upset about this, but you need to go to therapy.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree.
But I don't need that. And those are the ones I'm like, oh, we have too many unhealed healers out here.
Which also, what do you mean you don't need that? We're supposed to be preaching that everyone can use therapy and you don't need it. You're talking to people who have trauma and you just, if you've become that dumb, you need it.
Yes. And SE is like, this is a part of your learning. It's actually had SE sessions, SE specific sessions. Yeah. So I had a therapist I worked with the entire, almost the entire year during my second year, but I also had a supervisor therapist that also used SE. And so I still have a lot more sessions to do for myself, but you also then do individual case consults and group consults. And so what I noticed about training in certain modalities that I've studied even like outside of SE, there's no go do this yourself. It's like, here's this training, here's a certification, where SE is like, you need to walk the walk and feel the feel. So I very much appreciate that part of it.
Yes, I love that. I mean, that's exactly how it's supposed to be. How are you supposed to empathize with your client in full if you can't even say that you've experienced the therapy that they're experiencing?
Exactly.
And like, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that there are always going to be people within the profession that I disagree with. And I'm learning that already in school. So it's real fun when you see it immediately. Anyway. So I started this podcast so that I can have people on like-minded and who really also want to spread the importance of mental health anyway. So what methods are used within somatic experiencing therapy?
So we start off a lot with education and awareness of the body's defense system. I start educating clients and I use a lot of SE, but I bring in my own language of it. So I talk about consent, right? Understanding the consent of your body itself. You might tell me yes, but your body is like, no, right? Two different messages. And case in point, again, I had that client who had been in DBT, CBT, EMDR. It was like, none of this is working for me. I want to practice this. And that one session, that client no longer showed up. It was too much. right? And so it's like you were ready to do something completely different and you weren't ready, right? And that's okay, right? And I went too fast, right? And so it's a healthy level of accountability. This is early on. So of course, clinicians are making sure that we are giving clients permission to go inward. So we're always saying, I'm inviting you to take a minute to go inside and check in with what's showing up, right? And it's always an invitation. And a head shake is always an indication of whether we as therapists should say, let's do some external grounding.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with some senses. What do you see, right? We might then pull into some mindfulness exercise, or I call them mindfulness somatic, or in exercises outside of the body, because we might need to build a relationship to go inward.
Yeah.
And I have to educate them again on, so I love talking about, so somatic comes from the Greek word soma, which is body separate from the mind, right? And so I always say, I'm so excited to get started on this thing, but my body is like, so I'm like, we have to talk about body awareness, right? And
yes,
so there's a lot of education on the body and the trauma responses, and normalizing, you don't get to sometimes choose what response shows up. That's not always our option or our choice. Lastly, we really do start to talk about body sensations. And so I've had a lot of people tell me, even within, I've studied EMDR myself, I've had EMDR therapy myself, and there is a similarity, yet so different experience when we talk about what's showing up in your body. Because from an EMDR lens, I would say, oh, I am noticing like this, like I'm having such back pain and it's really like I'm so sleepy, or like I'm just giving you this. But somatic experience is like, let's stick to sensation words. I feel tingliness in my back.
mm-hmm.
It's hot. Yeah. It's cold. I feel like there's this blue aura. Yeah. Right. So we stick with more sensation words. And we're teaching clients how to communicate to us what's showing up for them using sensation words. And we help them learn how to sit with that uncomfortable part of their body and go to a comfortable part of their body. Your hands feel cold, but is there any part of your body that feels warm? Oh, well, actually, now that you're saying this, James, it's only my right hand that feels cold and my left hand feels warm. This happened 2 weeks ago. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, what is that about? Like, that had never happened before. And I'm like, notice the difference between the cold hand and the warm hand. And it was like, well, the warm hand is like closest to my heart. And I feel really protected. This hand feels so foreign. And they created meaning on a different way, on a profound way. But that started because we did education, because we talked about learning how to communicate to me with sensation words and experiences rather than interpretations. So
it is so amazing how separate your body is from your mind, like how you can really just forget that there's feeling there. Like I'll be doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. And a lot of the times I do it in the car because that's all of a sudden where I just start to get anxious for no reason. But so I'll start doing it and I'm like, oh, all of a sudden I can feel my foot on the pedal, my like butt on the seat, and my hands on the steering wheel. And it's weird that you just we obviously unconsciously just separate the two when they're together.
And that can be very scary for the body. I tell clients, your body it's depending on how old you are. I'm like, your body could have spent the last 20 years doing its own thing and your mind doing its own thing. And you think, oh, I'm ready to try that SC stuff or that somatic healing stuff. And your body's like, I did not, hold up. Why are you here? Like, we've been operating fine, right? And it's like having a fight between your mind and your body because we are so conditioned to go from point A to point B and not know how we got there. And your body's like, we've been doing this totally fine. And now you want to form a relationship. And sometimes I would tell my clients, like, let's stop for a moment and give our body gratitude for letting us come in and show up and say, thank you for giving me the opportunity to notice that there's 2 temperatures happening. Yeah. And that might be all that we do for literally an hour. Yeah. Because we're building consent and gratitude. And
like, thank you for doing these things when you felt uncomfortable with it. Like, it's funny because I don't know why. I guess I do in some reasons know why, my family wasn't really like the touchy-feely family. So I was not, my love language is not physical touch.
Physical touch.
But guess whose is? My husband. So
right? It's like, body, thank you for going in and giving him a hug.
Yes. I'm like, but also when I know now when I need it, even though my body's like, we're good. And I'm like, no, but like, how much better would we feel? And then when we do it, and at first I'm like, I'm sure my body language is like, don't touch me. And then it's just like melts and you're just like, that is what I needed.
Can we do that now? Just giving ourselves like a somatic hug, because I'm always like taking a breath in through the nose and just blowing out as if through a straw.
Yes. Oh, I love breath work too.
Just thank you for waking me up. Thank you for giving me all the energy I need to be on this amazing podcast, right? Just thank you for continuously saving my life.
Yeah.
Because contrary to popular belief, we don't save us, our bodies do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our body's doing all this heavy lifting, and we deserve to give it some compassion and a break.
Yeah, exactly. Oh gosh, like just like we need to give our minds some grace, we need to do the same with our bodies.
1000%.
Because like they both have minds of their own in a way,
And there's research to support it.
Yes. So they do. And speaking of touch, I read up on like how therapeutic touch is used in somatic healing. So could you talk about that?
That is so interesting, because I was looking and I was like, I actually can't speak to therapeutic touch yet from an SE lens, because I'm still approaching my final year and I'm also a clinical social worker. So I have a whole separate rule book of ethics when it comes to touch. And so I know that there are so many different SE practitioners who are also body workers. They are massage therapists, they are medical providers. And so they will have a much better ability to describe therapeutic touch. But what I will say is self-touch is what I was last studying, right? And so that self-hug part was like, there's the therapeutic power of touch for self. And so I might tell a client, give yourself a hug. And I actually had a client last fall when I worked in the counseling center that was not going to start. I knew going in that wasn't going to start. It was like a visual self-touch. Like because we do virtual therapy, the client looked at the screen and was able to say, I love you. Thank you for helping me to survive as long as you have. And that was the most powerful therapeutic touch that there was, because it would have been too soon to say hug yourself, because the client was like, it was an eating disorder. It was so many different, compounding factors. I was like, I don't even know where to go with this, right? And again, that speaks to like, that's just not my lens. But I will very much encourage the self-soothing. We do it in EMDR, right? We do it with containment. Giving yourself sort of that, like, I forget what it's called, maybe like
the butterfly.
The butterfly hug, right? Or the butterfly touch. You might see that within tapping, EFT, right? But there's so much more that comes with therapeutic touch from a therapist to a client that I have yet studied. But maybe we circle back and I'll give you some insight on
Yes.
Myler.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I haven't given myself like a self hug, and I can't even tell you how long. And so I'm glad that you brought that up on here, because I feel like people forget that they have that ability. Yes. And there was some type of research I read a long time ago saying like you need a certain amount of hugs per day.
Oh,
and
wow.
That increases your happiness. And like you could be providing that. Yeah, you could be providing that for yourself.
Well, I'm all for it, Yeah. I'm so all for it.
Yeah. It's like, I think we look outwards a lot for healing when really we can heal from within. And it's just about having that education that some people do need, because that's like, I mean, this is kind of off topic, but I had no idea how to communicate growing up.
Yes.
And I had to learn that. So there are things that you do have to learn, and that comes from outward. But once you figure it out, then the healing comes from within.
It will come, right? It will come. And no one gave us just like we talked earlier about, like, no one gave parents a parenting book, even though there are books out there. No one talks about communication. I tell my clients, I had to go to graduate school to learn how to communicate. One. Two, no one talked about emotions. I had to go to graduate school to talk about that. Why would I expect you to have not only communication skills, emotion skills, but body skills, right?
Yeah.
So I tell the client, let's talk about self-compassion for a moment, because we didn't get communication or emotion education. Why on earth would I expect you to know how to do body work?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Oh God, that's
and I often get the same response of laughter. Like, you know what, James, you're right. Like, I didn't even know how to communicate. Like, let's give ourselves that. So it is about also giving compassion, because we did not get these resources, and we can be grateful and give out gratitude for having the ability now to tap into resources that we didn't have as children. Healthy level of accountability.
Yes. Stop thinking your mental health professionals are some type of perfect guru.
No.
Because we're really trying and drowning sometimes. So sometimes. But then we get tossed a little floaty, and then we're good again. So
and we're good.
So what coping skills do you teach clients so that they can use outside of the room, outside of the therapy room?
Yes. So it is very much, again, learning how to use breath, the power of breath. I told the values of my business is time, space, and attention, TSA. And I have a client, we used to talk, because we talk about traveling a lot. And so the acronyms just so happen to also fall as TSA. And I was like, listen, we actually had our final session last week. And I was like, we spent the entire year working together to learn how to use our breath to give us TSA. How we use the breath to give our bodies time, space, and attention. And I say my skills, the skills that I give in SC is helping someone use time, space, and give their body attention, individualized attention. And we might resource. We might give you some coping strategies. I might pull in from, again, that's why SC is a supplementary approach. Mm-hmm. I might pull in DBT skills or CBT skills, self-soothing skills, self-compassion skills, and remind yourself that when you walk into a room, and if your body is like feeling anything, I'm teaching clients how to recognize those. I'm not saying leave the office meeting right now. You may not have the skills, the capacity, or the knowledge of why your body's doing this. Again, just like we started off, excitement, right? You might go into a meeting with a boss and you're feeling anxiety, but a cognitive approach would be like, oh my God, there's danger in here, get out of here. Whereas your body's like, I'm just so hyped, like I'm ready to do this. Right. So it is a lot of education, but we're also leaning onto the traditional skills that I would teach any other client.
And how can using substances like either drinking or certain drugs can affect that distancing between your yes. mind and body?
You are becoming much more disconnected from your body. We talk about trauma alarms, right? And I would say, when we experience trauma, it is like our alarm systems get flipped upside down, especially if we're in repeated traumatic experiences
that you can't leave,
that we can't leave. We now see what's safe is unsafe. And then what's unsafe feels safe. And so we flipped our alarms upside down, right? So someone experiencing substance use, having a substance use disorder or misusing them, are reinforcing that upside down alarm.
Yep.
So not only are we having to do a lot of education, lots of education, we're also having to deal with the extra stress of mental health and physical withdrawals from the substances. And then we have to talk about body consent. And then we have to talk about breath work. And then we have to talk about time, space, and attention. Right? And I have a client that it's very difficult because we're on this very long continuum right now, because we're just now getting to the realization that substances are a problem. And that took a year. Right? It took a whole year to be able to say, this is actually getting in the way of me doing what lights me up. And so substance use, as we've known, is very complicated, but it is actually no different than when we decide to selectively numb emotions by engaging with someone that is unhealthy, continuously showing up in unhealthy friends or going to those unhealthy friends
relationships,
and
yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
Right? Partying. Maybe we're not using substances, right? So I tell people we all use something to numb from our day-to-day experiences. What are you deciding to numb with? And I say, I am actually deciding to numb with love today. I'm going to put love into my veins, love into my body. Or I'm going to sleep and not go out and talk to people.
Listen, a little recharge, never hurt anyone.
Never, right? So I hope that answers your question.
It definitely does. I think I look at it, and I actually had someone on for substance abuse, and she did mention how she became disconnected from feeling like her body. It's because you're numbing out, like you said. And what is it that you're numbing from, or for? What are you trying to numb? And I guess that has to go into being able to listen to your body and just learning how to communicate with your body.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've even in the field, we really talk about the emphasis of now using substance use. Right. And we've learned to remove our words from oh, this person has a substance abuse problem. We'll say this person has a substance use problem, or this person is struggling with substance use disorder. Right. Because just like we know, what we say also impacts our body. Right. And so if I have a client coming in and I'm like, oh, let's talk about substances, there's what?
Yes.
I don't have a substance use problem. And I'm like, I'm just asking about questions.
Just asking.
And now I'm like, well, now we got to write that down, right? What's that about, right? And I tell clients, I'm not here to tell you whether you are abusing or misusing a substance. I'm here to tell you that it's all connected. Even someone that has no substance use issue, we all still numb with something. And Brene Brown says
still use it that way.
Exactly. Brene Brown says it so beautifully. We cannot selectively numb one emotion without numbing them all. We can't say, I want to experience joy and throw everything out. You numb your entire nerve system.
That's exactly what my teacher was talking about Thursday. We went into class and he was talking about how when you say, I don't even know how we got to this conversation. He was drawing on the chalkboard, and he made, I'm going to try to make everyone who's listening a little diagram in your mind, a vertical line. Okay. And it's your love scale, and 10 being the top. And if you cut it off halfway and say, I'm only going to love people this much, because past that, then I become vulnerable, and then I become hurt. And then you get confused, because sooner or later you become very, kind of numb to everything, and you become depressed. And that's because if you're cutting off one emotion, then you're doing it to the rest. You can't pick and choose like that.
Doesn't work. So our bodies need every emotional experience. Let's start there again.
Yep.
Right. Bringing this back to the body, our body needs every single emotional experience, because there's a lesson to be taught in all of them, rejection included. How do we wait until we're 50 to feel rejection for the first time? That doesn't work. We need to know what that rejection is like as early as, we need, every emotion has a purpose.
Yeah. And why, you hear rejection and then you're out, it's associated so negatively. And it's probably because when we're little, we're not taught that it's okay to feel these things. It's okay to fail. It's okay to be rejected. It's okay to not win. It's not going to be the end of the world. What matters is what you do with that next.
Absolutely. And that's where that is what happens with trauma, right? People say, what is trauma really about? Trauma, and I saw someone say, trauma is about how people treat you. And I was like, it's still not, the somatic lens is still missing from the conversations with people. I'm like, trauma isn't always about the specific event itself. It's about everything that happens after, how people treat you and how we perceive what happened during that. How our body, oh my God, my body shut down. Your body shut down to survive. right? It is, so trauma isn't just about the event itself, it's about how we perceive what happened, how others tell us what should have happened.
Yeah.
Right? So we got to
Absolutely.
move away from telling people you need to label something like this. Let your body do all of that.
And
There's a
stop
book.
comparing.
Yes.
Like if two people experience the same trauma, they probably didn't experience it in the same way, and that's okay.
Exactly. How about this for an interesting twist? I remember the client that I told you about with when I said, I'm so sorry this all happened to you. In that first session, the client came to me and asked me, was this type of abuse? And I was like, I want to pause before we try to label what this is. And I want to say, I'm so sorry this happened to you. And that's all that we did in that session. And I went into a supervision and I was like, in a group with all my coworkers, and I was like, this is what happened and this is what I said. And everyone was like, you should have told her. She had it, like, you missed the opportunity. You have no idea what it's like. And I was like, what that did for me, because as someone who has survived abuse and sexual abuse and sexual trauma, I was like, that's an assumption. That was a badass assumption to assume that I don't know what it's like. And I went back to the client, and then the client said, again, thank you for being the first person to even just say, I'm sorry. I followed my gut instinct, which was to just say, I'm sorry that happened to you. Not let me give you a name and a label for it. It was, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And look at the work that we did together, where she's out here making friends now.
Yes.
Right.
And that's something that you'll see too. One of the first episodes I talked about is like transference and that feeling like that's what was happening in that moment too. It's that you're able to a lot of the times get down to that level and say like, what could I have even heard in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
Like labeling it. Yeah. Is that helpful for sometimes? Yeah, it is, because sometimes people like need to hear someone else say it for it to become real.
Yes.
And also at the same time, sitting with your client, just sitting there with them and like letting them experience it with you and you experience it with them is so powerful that they're just able to feel that connection with someone.
Yeah. And that's not the first time I've ever worked. Like, I've been studying trauma forever. Like, you know, and I started to beat myself up. I was like, you shouldn't be in the field anymore. Like, how dare you miss this opportunity to say this thing? And I was like, I don't understand what happened. Like, I have literally labeled these words for people in so many other sessions. Like, I was like, what made it different? I was like, in that moment, SC stepped in and said, throw your social work hat off, right? Throw your social justice, I'm going to help you label off. I went from an SE lens this time. That was the difference. From every other session I've worked with labeling and naming trauma, this was the first where I went from an SE lens, and it just told me to sit with this person.
Yeah.
And then the next session, of course, we named it. And I was like, it's actually assault.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's always time, space, and attention, which is why my business is TS, right? My time, space, and attention. Time, well, let's just sit here because you shared this, because no one's ever listened to you share this story. No one's ever even acknowledged and validated that it happened. No one said, I'm sorry. But everyone told the client what it was, and they gave her the label of it. So what I actually did was clinically correct, because it went back to what was missing all those years ago, which was, I'm sorry this happened to you.
Yeah, that shouldn't have happened.
It shouldn't have happened. This person, like, what? I was like, I'm upset about this. Like, I'm sorry, because I shouldn't have, right? Like, I did what was in the moment called for me to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And what you said too, with like beating yourself up so much, that's something that's really important, I think, for everyone to hear listening, is that therapists and counselors and social workers and coaches and a lot of other types of mental health professionals are not just paid to care, like genuinely care to the point of thinking I shouldn't even be in this profession, I messed up, and like holding ourselves to such a high standard because we care so much. Like, also the pay, like, I hate to break it to you, but it ain't like, what you think it is.
This is not, I gotta work 5 jobs to do this. Like, I'm literally here to do the best job I can at giving people a lifeline, because I have had the pleasure and benefit of having so many providers in my life. Like I said earlier, I had chronic suicide ideations for over 10 years, and I didn't even tell a single therapist. Not one therapist I worked with in those 10 years did I ever tell. But the fact that they showed up and they did the best that they could was always the thing that got me through that dark period.
Yeah, because someone was there and someone cared and someone was consistent.
Consistency.
Yeah.
They all gave me time. They all gave me the space and the attention. And you're right, we burn the heck out, and we could do a much more effective job if we were paid a little bit better, where we're not having to work 5 or 6 jobs just to show up. So like, I wish I could help as many people as I could, but the way that these systems operate makes it almost impossible.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with like insurance. Like you want to be able to help even people. A lot of therapists will take cases pro bono because sometimes this like mean a lot to you, and these and that's what people aren't seeing. Like you're seeing this rate on psychology today, but a lot of therapists have sliding scales because they really care and really want to help people. Like that's the most important. That's the only reason going into this profession. You're not going into the profession for the money. That's like
we
saying,
did not. We know that, right?
That's like saying I'm going to go become a teacher. For
right? Like, and how about when you look at a rate? This is you had a question about like, what should people know about seeking counseling? I'm like, when you see a rate, trust that we're charging this rate because, first of all, look how much money it takes for me to 6 years of education, 6 figures of debt. In addition to my SC program, I'm spending over $1,000 a weekend, and I do 3 weekends for 3 years. Right?
Yeah.
That is just a train. That's not including my consultation group, individual sessions.
Yeah.
We're not doing this to hurt people. We're also trying to undo the system.
Yeah.
Like, so the fees that you see is not because people are like, oh, like I want to take advantage of your pain. It's like I had to do again, we have to help our clients, ourselves, our friends, and our family.
Yeah.
And we have to be this walking person that's helping. And again, we're not obviously everyone's therapist, but like we're still humans.
Yeah.
And my coach said to write down, and I wrote, I deserve a premium fee for what I do.
And exactly. And you don't want to feel guilted into doing your worth and knowing like I've worked my ass off to get to this. You know, like we should be punishing the system, not the therapist for this. And like, listen, clients out there, please advocate for that in mental health, because therapists, all mental health professionals are huge activists and advocates for not only you as a client, but also for this profession, because they care so much and don't want to see it get completely taken by greed. And it will, if there isn't people who advocate for that to not happen.
It absolutely will. And you will have the unhealed trying to heal people.
Yep.
We see it now.
It happens.
Be certified for $20 and you can go out and help people.
Yeah.
That is unhealthy.
Yep.
Right? Therapists have lives. They have their own we're therapists. We can't tell you what our experiences are. And trust that we actually have lived experience too. We didn't just go to grad school and learn. We have lived experiences too. Like I said, before 18, my ACEs score was 6. I didn't wake up and just say, I want to help people. Yay. Right? Like I knew it was within me. At the age of 4, I said I wanted to be a social worker. Yeah. I wanted change to be done in this world.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the people you'll see in these graduate programs are healed from hurt themselves, and they, through that healing, found that they want to help other people heal too.
Absolutely.
And experience what they've experienced in that.
Absolutely.
So, thank you so much for this conversation today.
Thank you.
Honestly, I love when I get to intertwine how important this profession is, and even talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. You know, it's every one of those things. And I just want to ask one last thing too: is what would you like individuals to know before seeking this form of counseling?
I want you to take away that you have to be aware of giving yourself a corrective experience with your body, that you have to learn, you have to be willing to say everything I thought I knew may not even be the whole story. We have a lot of Google kings and queens out there and peoples who think that Google is going to get them all that they need. If you're going in seeking somatic counseling, somatic experiencing, or somatic healing, any of these forms of body-oriented approaches, be willing to say, what I think I know may not be the whole story. Everything I think I know, even from if I've been in therapy before and I've done the CBT approach, right? Just be willing to put away everything you think you know about your body and what it needs. I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing. I'm just saying be willing.
And be open.
Just be open. And be open.
Open to the idea. Not even
yes.
having to be fully open, just open to the idea.
Yes.
Awesome. And where can people find you and follow you? I know we've talked about your podcast, which is awesome.
Yes.
And go follow that. Where can people follow you on Instagram or wherever else?
If you follow me on Instagram, you'll follow me. You'll find everything. You'll find me on everything else. You can find me at JAMESDWILLIAMS. So that is @_James D. Williams. Again, if you find me on Instagram, you will find all the amazing projects that I'm doing.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to add that in the show notes and tag you on everything on Instagram. So if y'all need an easier way to find him, just go there. But thank you so much again, James, for talking with me today. What a powerful, I feel, way this ended today. We started on a very happy, laughy, but in the end, it just feels like the room feels lighter.
Yeah. And thank you for having me. I am so excited to see all that you do. And you just keep putting out this amazing, great and amazing content.
Thank you. I'm trying. It's with people like you and all other professionals like you that make this content so awesome too. So
I'm gonna learn to accept this amazing compliment. Thank you very much for those words.
Thank you. Okay, well, you enjoy your Sunday, and I look forward to talking to you next.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
All right, bye.
Today's music was written and produced by Tyler O'Brien. You can find him on Instagram at Dreamscape, DREAMSCAPE, and follow his band at Wastelander_band on Instagram.